Called Life in Clubland. I was worried about my relationship, mostly little things about it. I never spend time in my apartment anymore, so when I go back to pay my bills and guess at my first rate balance and pick up new earrings, I notice that the Swedish ivy is this much closer to dying and that the plastic bag collection is almost completely out of control. Well, I'm lying about that. The bags collect along the walls of this one-room apartment, and I can never remember which ones are strong enough to tote around the books that I sell. I review books, at least that's what I tell people I do for money, and all the New York publishers still think this Alston address is my home. So I come back here twice a week maybe, when Ian is rehearsing his band. But really so Ian doesn't get too used to me, at least I tell myself I do. But somehow, every time I make an unexpected reappearance at this flat, Ian inherits a case of Rolling Rock from Jim, his drummer, and they all sit around and drink and laugh. Or Ian comes into a vial of Percocets from Rudy, the singer, and they all sit around and drink and space out. Not that I need to space out with members of the Dustbusters, but I associate lots of beer with Ian in good times. I miss something when I'm not there, but I tell him that I have to check the messages in my machine and change my clothes, so the lady who runs the thrift boutique I work at looks at me askance when I show up in the same stained Irish knit sweater too many days in a row. Plus, I like to read in my own apartment. Ian's basement, his alone, thank God, is too dark for the kind of reading consuming I do for my reviews. He doesn't have a typewriter, so I can't work there. Still, there's plenty to distract me. I like to play his Les Paul, since he leaves it lying around. Every time I pick up that solid gleaming guitar, I come up with bits of songs. Nothing much, just hummable melodies I can play on open chords. I like to think that the Les Paul gets satisfaction from these amateur doodles. Most of the time, it's strapped onto Ian when he's on stage at the Oyster Bar or at Maudie's. When I'm done, I wipe it down with a soft towel and rub the grime from between the pickups. I like the strings to shine. Once, I don't know what came over me, I took a bunch of Q-tips and dipped them in isopropyl alcohol so I could clean underneath the knobs regulating volume and tone, none of which I use, and which I can't hear anyway since I'm never plugged in. I don't think Ian noticed. Ian has gotten used to taking my messages at his house. Most of the calls come from longtime friends. Friends I neglect every time I lock into a relationship, twice since the start of this decade, but who put in calls for me whenever I'm in flux. They call regularly, and with each refusal of a get-together forgive me until they're no longer surprised to find me at this new telephone exchange. Ian never writes anything down, but I see him every day and get to find out that Kristen or Trish is looking for me. When they do track me down, they invariably ask about Ian. Who's behind that charming drawl they flirt? But it's okay, since I'm convinced that Ian is monogamous. Ian has gotten used to me replacing the Les Paul in its sturdy, stickered case, and I know he doesn't chat with my phone friends to any great length. That's good, because when I get up the stamina to see the Dustbusters play, I'd rather not think about the pert, full-faced college girls clotting in front of the stage. Most of them are pretty shy, although I know the regulars, and they know me, and between sets solicitously ask, how am I doing, though their eyes flicker to the brashly lit backstage door. They want Rudy, I reassure myself. Rudy is better looking. No, that's cruel. Ian is more interesting looking, since his frayed flannel shirts always make him look derelict next to Rudy's glossy, dapper suits. When I get really paranoid, I'm convinced that the Dustbusters encourage Ian to stop having a steady girlfriend so he can join them in their after-hours flirtations. At the start of my relationship with him, he stayed by my side until the band had to set up, and then stared at me between the solos, a vague look of lust and happiness lighting up his peaked face, while his left hand grasped the neck of the Les Paul, the pick in his right hand chittered excitedly over the strings. That was the start, and that's what compelled me to drag over sundry clothes and books I was reading to his house. Now I try to read at his house, at nights when he's playing, since I know he has to come back there. Dropped off at 3 in the morning in Jim's band, the Les Paul case banging his hips, he unlocks the door and sees me reading. I put aside my book and swing the shade of the tensor lamp up so there's a fuzzy circle of yellow light on the ceiling. Mustering a smile, I ask, how's the gig? Okay. Good. Yeah, it was good. I'm really beat, though, he says, and leans the guitar case against his fireplace. A fireplace in a basement? I was impressed until he said he could never light it because the wind always blew the smoke back down the chimney and into the room. I watch him shuffle into the bathroom and listen to him abrading his teeth, sigh, and then collapse on his bed. That's when I can go in, unlace his sneakers, unzip his jeans, and yank his clothes off. If he's already asleep, I slip in beside him and count things, like the drawers in his bureau, with the patchwork squares on his quilt. 12 across with 8 down times 16, the number of squares equals, I always forget, or the books I haven't read yet, or the words that rhyme with love and alone, because an hour later when I cannot sleep, I slipped away and unpacked the last call. Hope you remembered to bring his pick home. Thank you.